When he walked out, the sound of the door closing was the loudest silence I have ever heard. It wasn't just the end of our 15-year marriage. It was the violent, abrupt end of the version of me that had been built around his presence, his opinions, his love. That version of me was dismantled in an instant, leaving a hollowed-out shell standing in our foyer. I spent the weeks that followed feeling utterly broken, completely abandoned, my mind a torturous loop questioning my worth, my appeal, my very reason for being. What had I done wrong? What was so fundamentally lacking in me that he could walk away so easily? The grief was a physical weight, making it hard to breathe, to eat, to get out of bed. Then slowly, agonizingly, like the first green shoots after a forest fire, I began to rebuild. It started with a single therapy appointment, then a walk around the block, coffee with a friend I'd neglected. I began rebuilding my routines, my career, my confidence, brick by painful brick, rediscovering the person I was before his promises, before his lies, before I had handed him the blueprint to my happiness. 7 months later, he appeared on my doorstep, a wilted version of the confident man who had left. His shoulders were slumped, his eyes were red-rimmed and full of tears, his words a desperate, stumbling plea for forgiveness. He said it had all been a terrible mistake, that he was a fool, that he missed me, that he missed us. Once his tears would have been my command. I would have collapsed into his arms, soothed his pain, and absolved him of everything, my own needs be damned. But as I stood there, looking at this man I had once loved more than life itself, a profound clarity washed over me. I saw him not as my savior returning, but as a man who had expected me to stay small, to remain in the crater of his leaving, waiting for his return. And for the first time since the day he left, I realized the ultimate victory wasn't in revenge, or in making him pay. It wasn't even in saying no. The victory was in the simple, breathtaking realization that I didn't need to say yes. The victory was my freedom. I met Mark during my final year of college. He was the charming, charismatic business major who seemed to have his entire life mapped out. I was an art history student, a dreamer with a heart full of poetry and a head full of vague, beautiful ambitions. We were the classic case of opposites attracting. He grounded me. I helped him see the beauty in the unplanned. Our love felt like a perfect complementary dance. For 15 years we built a life. I put my dreams of working in a museum on hold to support his rise up the corporate ladder. We moved cities 3 times for his career. I was the one who made our houses into homes, who remembered his mother's birthday, who hosted the dinner parties that impressed his clients. My world, which had once felt so vast, slowly shrank to the dimensions of our shared life. My opinions became our opinions. My friends became our friends. My happiness became inextricably linked to his. He was a good provider, but the balance of power was always subtly skewed. He managed the finances because he was better with numbers. He made the big decisions because he had the clearer head for business. I didn't mind at first. It felt like a partnership. But over time, I became a supporting character in the story of Mark's life. I stopped painting. I stopped seeing the friends who didn't fit his idea of a power couple. I learned to quiet the parts of myself that he found too emotional or impractical. The first cracks were so small I almost missed them. He started working later. His phone, which used to be an open book, developed a password. He became more critical, picking at my clothes, my cooking, the way I talked to our neighbors. "I'm just trying to help you be your best," he'd say when I flinched. I now know this was the slow, systematic dismantling of my self-esteem, a process that made his eventual departure not just a possibility, but an inevitability. I was being prepared for my own obsolescence. The trigger was a text message. It was a Sunday afternoon. Mark was in the shower, and his phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. A notification from Amanda W. flashed on the screen. Can't stop thinking about last night. You've ruined me for any other man. The world tilted on its axis. My blood ran cold then hot. Last night, he had been at a client dinner. I felt the floor drop out from under me. When he emerged from the shower, a towel around his waist, he found me sitting at the table, his phone in my hand, my face a mask of stunned disbelief. He didn't deny it. He didn't even look surprised. He just sighed. A weary, put-upon sigh, as if I were the one causing a problem. "It's not what you think, Julia," he began, but the lie died in his throat when he saw my expression. "Who is she?" I whispered, my voice trembling. What followed wasn't a confession. It was a resignation letter from our marriage. He told me Amanda was a junior associate at his firm. She was driven, ambitious, understood the pressures of his world. He spoke of her with a reverence he hadn't used for me in years. He said he loved me, but he wasn't in love with me anymore. He said we had grown apart. He used all the cliches, each one a fresh stab to the heart. The worst part was his calmness. He had already grieved our relationship, processed its end and moved on, all while sharing a bed and a life with me. The man I had built my world around had been living a double life, and I was the last to know. He packed a bag that night. The sound of the front door closing behind him was the sound of my entire reality shattering. The days and weeks that followed were a blur of pure, unadulterated agony. The silence in the house was deafening. I couldn't sleep in our bed, so I curled up on the couch, surrounded by the ghosts of our life together. I stopped eating. I lost weight. I would break down sobbing in the grocery store, triggered by the sight of his favorite brand of coffee. Mutual friends I soon discovered had known. They had seen them together at business functions. The humiliation was a layer of acid on top of the raw wound of betrayal. I felt like a fool, a discarded, obsolete appliance. The financial terror set in quickly. I had no income of my own. Our joint account, which he had always managed, was suddenly empty. He had opened a new account and transferred the funds, leaving me with just enough to cover 1 month's mortgage. When I called him panicked, his voice was cold. "You'll need to figure things out, Julia. I'm not an ATM." I was being punished for his betrayal. I was 52 years old, with a resume that had a 15-year gap, facing financial ruin and profound loneliness. I felt like I was drowning, and the person who had pushed me overboard was calmly sailing away. The final crushing blow was seeing a picture on a friend's social media feed. It was from a company gala. There he was, arm wrapped around Amanda, beaming with a joy I hadn't seen on his face in a decade. He looked free. He looked happy. And in that moment, something in me broke, not into smaller pieces, but into something harder. The grief began to curdle into a fierce, burning resolve. My sister Claire finally staged an intervention. She showed up at my door, took one look at me and declared, "Enough." She made me shower, fed me soup, and then she handed me a business card. "This is my friend, Sarah. She's a therapist. You're going to see her. And you're going to call this woman Elena. She's a lawyer." Therapy was my lifeline. It was where I learned that I wasn't going crazy. I was grieving. It was where I began to untangle my identity from his. My lawyer Elena was a pit bull. She froze our assets, secured spousal support, and began the process of ensuring I got my fair share. But the true turning point, the moment the power balance irrevocably shifted, was when I was cleaning out the garage. I found a box of my old things from college. Inside were sketchbooks filled with my drawings, journals full of my poetry, and an acceptance letter to a prestigious museum studies program in New York, a program I had turned down when Mark proposed. I sat on the dusty concrete floor, surrounded by the artifacts of my former self, and I wept. I wasn't just weeping for my marriage. I was weeping for the vibrant, ambitious, creative young woman I had buried in order to become Mark's wife. In that moment I made a decision. I would not let his betrayal be the end of my story. It would be the beginning. I enrolled in an online course to update my skills. I started painting again, turning our sterile beige guest room into a vibrant, chaotic art studio. I reconnected with old friends. I was no longer the victim of Mark's choices. I was the architect of my own comeback. My plan was not about getting back at Mark. It was about building a life so fulfilling that his presence or absence in it became irrelevant. My quiet countermove was to invest every ounce of my energy into myself. I took a part-time job at a local art gallery, a position that paid very little but fed my soul. I started a small blog, anonymously at first, chronicling my journey of rediscovery. It wasn't about my divorce. It was about finding beauty in the everyday again. To my surprise, it began to attract a small loyal following. I worked with Elena to ensure the divorce settlement was fair. I didn't fight for the house out of sentimentality. I fought for my fair share of its equity, the financial representation of my 15 years of unpaid labor as a homemaker and support system. I was calm, I was reasonable, I was immovable. I was no longer the emotional, broken woman he had left. I was a negotiator. Meanwhile, through mutual acquaintances, I heard snippets of his life with Amanda. The passion was fading. The reality of a new relationship, with its own demands and compromises, was setting in. He was discovering that the grass isn't always greener. Sometimes it's just different grass with its own set of weeds. I didn't gloat. I simply continued building my new, beautiful, and independently weeded garden. The confrontation happened on a rainy Tuesday evening. My doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. I opened the door and there he stood. Mark. He looked diminished. The expensive suit was rumpled. His hair was messy, and his eyes were haunted. Julia, he said, his voice cracking. Can I come in? I didn't say yes, but I didn't slam the door. I simply stepped back, allowing him entry into my space. He stood in my foyer looking around at the changes. The walls, once beige, were now a warm terracotta. My paintings were everywhere. The house no longer smelled like his cologne. It smelled like my essential oils and fresh coffee. He broke down then. The tears were real this time, not the performative ones I'd seen during our fights. He told me it had all been a catastrophic mistake. Amanda was demanding, high maintenance. She didn't understand him like I did. The passion was exhausting. He missed our comfort, our history, me. He was on his knees begging. Please, Julia. Forgive me. Take me back. I'll do anything. I looked down at this man, this stranger I had once known so intimately. I felt a profound sense of pity but no desire. The tether that had bound me to him for so long had been severed. Mark, I said, my voice calm and steady. I do forgive you. His face lit up with a desperate hope. But, I continued, forgiveness isn't the same as a reunion. I forgive you for my own peace so I can let go of the anger. But I will never ever trust you again. And I will never go back to being the woman I was when you left. The hope in his eyes died, replaced by a stunned, devastated realization. He had expected to find the broken woman he could rescue. Instead, he found a whole woman who didn't need rescuing, least of all by him. The power in the room was absolute and it was all mine. He left that night a broken man. The divorce was finalized shortly after. I used my settlement to buy a small, charming cottage by the sea. My little art blog grew into a successful online community. I even sold a few of my paintings. I am, for the first time in my life, truly authentically happy. I heard through the grapevine that he and Amanda broke up. He is alone. I feel no schadenfreude. Only a distant sadness for the life we could have had if he had chosen to grow with me instead of seeking an escape. This real-life story taught me that rock bottom can become the most solid foundation you will ever build upon. I learned that the most powerful revenge is not hatred or bitterness, but a profound and utter indifference. It is the quiet peace of a life so full and so authentically yours that the person who broke your heart becomes irrelevant, a footnote in the story of your becoming. He cheated, lied, and left, thinking he was destroying me. In reality, he was forcing me to find myself. And the woman I found was far more incredible than the one he had left behind. Your value is not determined by someone's inability to see your worth. His departure wasn't a loss. It was the necessary evacuation that made room for me to finally move in. If this emotional story about betrayal, healing, and finding your own strength has resonated with you, please share your thoughts in the comments. For more calm, reflective real-life stories, like and subscribe. Thank you for listening.